pulse of him.
I ghosted Caleb on a Tuesday night, which feels important now, even if it didn't then. Not in some dramatic, final text kind of way. I just stopped replying. One message went unanswered, then two, then a week passed, and suddenly it felt too awkward to come back from. You know how that goes. Life fills the silence, and you let it. The thing is, Caleb hadn't done anything wrong. That almost made it worse. We'd gone on 3 dates. Coffee that turned into dinner. A walk that turned into sitting on the hood of his car talking about nothing. He listened in a way that made you forget to perform. That should have been a green flag. Instead, it scared the hell out of me. So I disappeared. I told myself I was sparing him. I told myself I was busy. I told myself a lot of things that sounded reasonable at 2 a.m. and felt cowardly in daylight. Then came the week everything else fell apart. It started with my freelance client pulling out, no warning, just a polite email and a stomach-drop realization that half my rent had evaporated. The same day, my sister called to tell me our dad was back in the hospital. Nothing life-threatening, she said, which somehow didn't make it better. And by Thursday, my car wouldn't start. Just a dull click, like it was done trying. By Friday night, I was sitting on my apartment floor eating dry cereal out of a mug because I couldn't be bothered to wash a bowl. That's when my phone buzzed. Caleb's name lit up the screen like it had every right to. I stared at it for a long time. Long enough for the screen to dim. Long enough to feel that old familiar shame crawl up my spine. Caleb, hey. This is probably weird. Caleb, but I drove past your place and saw your lights on. Caleb, just wanted to check in. You okay? I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. Of all the people in the city, the one I'd vanished on was the one reaching out. I didn't reply. At least, not right away. I sat there on the floor, back against the couch, phone in my hand, feeling smaller than I had in years. I thought about how easy it would be to ignore him again. Keep the pattern intact. Be consistent in my avoidance, if nothing else. Instead, my fingers moved before I could overthink it. I'm not. Me, if I'm being honest. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Caleb, want company? Caleb, no pressure. I can just drop off food and go. I don't know why that's what broke me. The idea that he'd show up just to make sure I ate, then leave without demanding anything in return, it felt like too much kindness for the version of myself I was that week. I sent him my apartment number. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. Caleb stood there holding a paper bag that smelled like Thai food and rain. His hair was damp, jacket unzipped, expression careful, not hurt, not angry. Just open. Hey, he said softly. Hey, I replied, suddenly hyper-aware of the state I was in. Sweatpants. Bare feet. Eyes that felt too heavy. He didn't comment on any of it. Just lifted the bag a little. Pad Thai. Extra peanuts. You mentioned that once. I stepped aside to let him in. We ate on the couch, knees almost touching, the TV on mute. No big talk. No confrontation. Just quiet bites and the low hum of the city outside my window. After a while I said, I'm sorry I disappeared. Caleb nodded, like he'd already made peace with that sentence existing. I figured something was going on. That doesn't make it okay. No, he agreed gently. But it makes it human. The words settled between us, heavy but not sharp. He didn't reach for me. Didn't ask for explanations. He just stayed. At some point, I leaned back, exhaustion finally winning. My head tipped toward him, stopping just short of his shoulder. You can lean, he said quietly. If you want. I did. His warmth was immediate, grounding. One arm rested along the back of the couch, close but not trapping me. I breathed for what felt like the first time all week. I had a bad week, I murmured. I know, he said. That's why I'm here. We stayed like that until the food was gone and the night softened around us. No promises. No labels. Just a shared stillness that felt safe. And as I sat there, leaning into the guy I'd ghosted, I realized something uncomfortable and undeniable was taking shape. I hadn't been protecting myself by disappearing. I'd been running from the exact thing I needed. Caleb didn't stay the night. That feels important to say, because part of me expected something dramatic, some line crossed, some moment I'd replay later and analyze to death. Instead, he left around midnight, standing by the door like he didn't want to assume anything he hadn't been invited to. "I'm around this weekend," he said, hand on the doorknob. "If you need whatever." I nodded. "Thanks for coming." He smiled, small and real. "I'm glad you texted back." After he left, the apartment felt quieter, but not emptier. That was new. Usually silence pressed in on me. This time it just settled. Saturday hit hard anyway. I woke up with that familiar chest weight, the kind that makes even small decisions feel impossible. My phone had 3 missed calls from my sister and an email from my landlord politely reminding me about upcoming obligations. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, then rolled onto my side and checked my messages like I was bracing for impact. There was one from Caleb. "Caleb, morning. No need to reply. Just saying hi." I did reply. Not immediately. But I did. The day unraveled in small, irritating ways. The bus ran late. The grocery store card reader was down. I forgot my reusable bags and had to juggle plastic handles cutting into my hands all the way home. By the time I got back to my apartment, I was exhausted in that deep, emotional way sleep doesn't touch. I dropped the groceries on the counter and slid down to the floor again, back against the cabinets. Same spot as Friday night. That's when it hit me, how quickly I'd started associating that space with being okay. My phone buzzed. "Caleb, random question. Do you like dogs?" I snorted. Random, didn't begin to cover it. "Me, yeah? Why?" "Caleb, because I'm dog sitting and he's refusing to nap unless someone else witnesses his suffering." "Caleb, want to come over?" No expectations. Couch, coffee, 0 emotional labor required. I stared at the message. My instinct was to say no. To protect my mess from being seen. To keep my sadness contained where it couldn't inconvenience anyone. But something in me was tired of being alone on purpose. Caleb's place smelled like coffee and clean laundry. There was a dog, medium-sized, anxious-looking, tail wagging like it was overcompensating. Caleb laughed when the dog immediately leaned into my legs. "See?" he said. "He approves." We didn't talk much at first. I sat on one end of the couch, dog sprawled half on my lap, Caleb on the other end scrolling through something on his phone. The TV played some low-stakes cooking show, volume low. At one point, Caleb stood up. "I'm gonna make another pot. You want some?" "Yeah," I said. Then, quieter, "Thanks." He glanced back at me like he heard the second part more than the first. I stayed for hours. Long enough for the dog to fall asleep with his head on my thigh. Long enough for my shoulders to unclench. Long enough that the noise in my head dropped from a shout to a hum. I didn't explain everything. He didn't ask for it. We talked about stupid things, bad tattoos, cities we almost moved to, the mutual hatred of online forums that ask for your 5-year plan. When it got dark, I realized something quietly terrifying. I felt safe. Not euphoric. Not fixed. Just held by the moment. Like I could sit in the middle of my bad week and not be judged for it. As I left, Caleb squeezed my shoulder, not lingering, not loaded. Just steady. "Anytime," he said. Walking home, I understood the shift happening inside me. Ghosting him hadn't erased the connection. It had just delayed the inevitable truth. I didn't disappear because I didn't care. I disappeared because I cared more than I knew how to handle. And somehow, without asking for it, Caleb had become the place I could rest while I figured that out. By Monday, my bad week had officially become a bad stretch. The hospital called to say my dad would need another procedure. Not urgent, but not nothing. My sister tried to sound calm and failed. I sat at my kitchen table listening to her talk, nodding even though she couldn't see me, tracing circles into the wood with my thumb like I could wear the worry down if I kept moving. After the call, I didn't cry. That worried me more than if I had. I texted Caleb without really thinking. Me, are you busy tonight? He replied almost immediately. Caleb, nope. Caleb, want to come over or want me to come to you? I stared at the question longer than necessary. It wasn't loaded. He wasn't asking why dash. He was just offering options. Me, can you come here? He showed up with groceries again, like it was just his default setting now. Soup, bread, something sweet I didn't remember mentioning but apparently had, at some point. He moved around my kitchen easily, like he wasn't afraid of being in my space. I hope that's okay, he said, nodding at the bags. It is, I said. Then, quieter, thank you. We ate at the small table by the window. I finally told him about my dad, about the money stress, about how tired I was of holding everything together with duct tape and good intentions. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't minimize it either. I just said it. Caleb listened. Really listened. No fixing. No silver lining. Just attention. That's a lot, he said when I finished. Yeah. You don't have to carry it alone, he added, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. After dinner, we sat on the couch again. Same positions as the first night, like our bodies remembered before our brains did. This time, when I leaned in, he adjusted without hesitation, arm coming around me in a way that felt natural instead of tentative. I rested my head against his chest and stared at the wall, breathing him in. He smelled like clean soap and something familiar I couldn't name. Can I ask you something? He said quietly. Okay. Why did you disappear? There it was. Not accusatory. Just honest. I swallowed. Because you felt safe. And every time someone's felt safe before, I've eventually lost them. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. His chest rose and fell under my cheek steady. That explains it, he said. Doesn't make it not hurt. But it explains it. I'm sorry, I said again. This time it felt different, earned. He shifted slightly so I could see his face. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be here. When you can. Something loosened in me at that. A knot I hadn't realized was tied so tight. We didn't kiss. Not that night. We watched some dumb documentary instead, my legs tucked under me, his hand resting on my arm like an anchor. At some point, my eyes closed. I woke briefly to him pulling a blanket over us, careful not to wake me all the way. Later, when he stood to leave, I walked him to the door. I don't want to ghost you again, I said, the words heavier than they sounded. He smiled softly. Then don't. After he left, I stood there for a while, hand still on the doorknob, feeling the echo of his presence in the quiet apartment. For the first time in a long while, the quiet didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like rest. The week didn't magically get better. That's not how it worked. But it stopped getting worse, which felt like its own kind of mercy. Wednesday night, I went with my sister to the hospital. We sat in those stiff plastic chairs that always smell faintly like antiseptic and burnt coffee, watching people move past us with charts and tired eyes. Dad was stable, joking badly like he always did when he was scared. I laughed in the right places and held his hand longer than usual. When we finally left, it was late. The city felt hollowed out, streetlights blinking like they were as exhausted as I was. I didn't text Caleb from the hospital. I didn't want to turn him into my emergency contact by accident. But when I got home and kicked my shoes off, the quiet hit me again, lighter than before, but still heavy enough to notice. My phone buzzed. Caleb, how did today go? I sat down on the edge of my bed and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Me long. But okay-ish. Caleb, want company or space? That question? Always that question. No assumptions, no pressure. Me company. but I don't have energy to talk much. Caleb, perfect. I'm good at quiet. He came over with nothing in his hands this time. No food, no plan. Just himself. It felt intentional, like he was meeting me where I was instead of trying to fix it. We lay on opposite ends of the bed at first, shoes off, lights low. The ceiling fan hummed softly overhead. I stared at the blades spinning and thought about how strange it was that someone could feel familiar so quickly without feeling invasive. Caleb shifted closer slowly, giving me time to register it. When his arm brushed mine, I didn't flinch. I turned onto my side, facing him. He mirrored the movement without a word. You okay? He asked quietly. Yeah, I said. Just tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. At some point, his hand found mine between us. Not dramatic. Just fingers resting against fingers, waiting. I curled mine around his without thinking. It felt grounding, like holding on to something solid during turbulence. We didn't talk after that. We didn't need to. I could hear his breathing, slow and even. I matched it without realizing I was doing it. The closeness didn't feel charged or fragile, it felt stable. Like something that could hold weight without cracking. When I finally spoke, my voice was barely above a whisper. I'm scared I'll mess this up. Caleb's thumb brushed once over my knuckles. You probably will, he said gently. So will I. I huffed a quiet laugh. That's reassuring? It's realistic, he replied. We just decide whether we keep showing up anyway. That sat with me. Not as a promise, but as a possibility. I fell asleep like that, hand in his, fully clothed, lights still on. I woke briefly to him adjusting the pillow under my head, careful and unhurried. When I drifted off again, it was with the strange, steady certainty that I wasn't bracing for loss in that moment. In the morning, he was gone, but the bed still held the shape of him. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Caleb, had to head out early. Caleb, you slept. I didn't want to wake you. Caleb, text me when you're up. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, sunlight creeping in around the curtains, and realized something quietly profound. Somewhere between the ghosting and the bad week and the shared silences, Caleb had stopped being just a guy I was afraid to want. He had become a place my nervous system recognized as safe. And that scared me, but in a way that felt worth facing. By the end of that week, people at the coffee shop knew my order again. That felt like progress. It sounds small, but when your world shrinks down to survival mode, routines become lifelines. Wake up. Shower. Coffee. Check email. Breathe. Repeat. Somewhere in that rhythm, Caleb slipped in, not loudly, not disruptively. Just, consistently. We didn't see each other every day. That mattered too. It kept things from tipping into dependency, which I was quietly afraid of. Instead, we texted in that low-pressure way that said I'm here without demanding anything back. Friday night, I suggested we go for a walk. No couch, no apartment walls, no safety nets. Just outside. The air was cool, the kind that smells like rain even when the sky's clear. We walked side by side through my neighborhood, hands brushing occasionally, not quite touching. I noticed everything, the sound of our footsteps sinking, the way he adjusted his pace when I slowed without commenting on it. You doing okay today? He asked. I thought about it honestly. Yeah. Not great. But okay. He nodded. I like that answer. We ended up at a small overlook near the river. The city lights reflected on the water, broken and beautiful. We leaned against the railing, shoulders touching this time. No hesitation. I've been meaning to say something, Caleb said. My stomach tightened. Old reflex. Okay, I replied, bracing. I don't regret reaching out after you disappeared, he said. I just wanted you to know that. Even if this stays exactly as it is. I swallowed. I do regret disappearing. I know, he said gently. And you've shown that. Silence settled again, but it felt different, anticipatory, not heavy. I turned my head slightly and caught him looking at me, expression open, unreadable in the low light. I'm scared, I admitted. That once things stop being hard, you'll realize I'm not worth the effort. Caleb didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out, slow, visible, and rested his hand over mine on the railing. Gave me time to pull away. I didn't. Hard weeks don't create value, he said quietly. They just reveal where it already is. That did something to me. Something quiet and deep and irreversible. I turned fully toward him. He mirrored me, close enough now that I could feel his breath. Can I? He asked. I nodded. The kiss was soft. Almost careful. Like we were both aware of how much weight it carried and didn't want to rush it. His lips were warm, steady, unhurried. I leaned in without thinking, one hand coming up to rest at his side, grounding myself in the reality of him. When we pulled back, our foreheads touched briefly. Neither of us smiled right away. It wasn't that kind of moment. Walking home afterward, my hand stayed in his. Not gripping. Just present. The city hummed around us, indifferent and alive. At my door, he didn't assume he was coming in. Just stopped, turned to me. Thank you for trusting me, he said. Thank you for waiting, I replied. After he left, I went inside and stood in my kitchen, listening to the quiet hum of the fridge, the distant traffic outside. Same apartment. Same walls. But something fundamental had shifted. I hadn't been rescued. I hadn't been fixed. I had been met. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of what might come next. I was curious. That felt like hope, or at least the beginning of it. The week after we kissed felt strangely normal, and that might have been the scariest part. No dramatic shift. No constant texting. No sudden declarations. Just the same steady rhythm, slightly warmer around the edges. Like someone had turned the volume down on my anxiety without muting the world. My dad's procedure got scheduled. The client situation stayed unresolved but not catastrophic. My car still refused to start, but I learned the bus routes well enough that it stopped feeling like a personal failure. Life didn't fix itself. I just stopped feeling like it was actively hunting me. Caleb and I fell into something unspoken. We'd meet for coffee or walk the dog. He was still sitting. Sometimes we kissed, sometimes we didn't. It wasn't about escalation. It was about presence. One night, he came over after work, shoulders tight, eyes tired in a way I recognized. Bad day? I asked. He nodded. Yeah. One of those where you keep it together until you don't. I shifted on the couch to make space. You don't have to keep it together here. That got me a look, something soft and surprised. He leaned back, head against the cushion, eyes closed. I rested my hand on his chest without thinking, feeling the steady beat underneath. It felt reciprocal now, like comfort could move both ways. Can I tell you something without it changing anything? He asked. Okay. I'm not always the calm one, he said quietly. I learned how to be because things were loud growing up. I got good at making space for other people. Sometimes I forget I'm allowed to take it too. I swallowed. You are. With me. He opened his eyes and looked at me like he was recalibrating something internal. Yeah, he said. I think I believe that. We stayed like that for a while, breathing each other in, the city humming outside like background noise instead of threat. Later we moved to the bed, not to sleep, not to do anything dramatic. Just to lie down, fully clothed, facing opposite directions but close enough that our backs touched. It felt intimate in a way I couldn't have handled a month ago. Hey, I murmured. Thank you for not asking me to be okay before I was. He shifted closer, back pressing into mine. Thank you for letting me stay. When he left that night, I didn't feel that familiar drop in my chest. No panic, no preemptive grief. Just a quiet confidence that we'd see each other again, not because we promised, but because we wanted to. I cleaned my kitchen after he left. Washed the mug he'd used. Wiped down the counter. Small acts of care that didn't feel performative, just lived in. Standing there, hands still damp from the sink, I realized something important. Caleb wasn't my safe place because he rescued me or filled a void. He was my safe place because he stayed consistent while I learned how to stay too. And as the week finally loosened its grip on me, that felt like enough. The bad week ended quietly, not with relief but with acceptance. My dad came through the procedure fine. Tired, sore, stubborn as ever. My sister sent a photo of him giving a thumbs up that looked more sarcastic than reassuring, but I laughed anyway. I still didn't know how I was going to replace the lost income, but I sent out proposals instead of doom scrolling. I even got my car started with the help of a stranger and a jump cable that smelled like burned rubber and mercy. Life didn't suddenly feel easy. It just felt survivable. Caleb came over that Sunday afternoon with the dog again. Apparently the owners kept extending their trip. The dog barreled past me like we were old friends, nails clicking on the floor, tail knocking into furniture with reckless joy. "Sorry," Caleb said, laughing. "He's decided you're his person now." "Figures," I said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "I attract the emotionally needy." Caleb gave me a look. Not teasing. Understanding. We sat on the floor while the dog chewed something indestructible between us. Sunlight poured through the windows, dust motes drifting lazily. It felt like a moment you don't realize is important until much later. "I've been thinking," I said, picking at a loose thread on the rug, "about how I show up. Or don't." Caleb waited. He always did. "I don't want to disappear again," I continued. "Not when things get hard. Not when they get good either." He nodded slowly. "I don't need guarantees. I just need honesty when you're pulling away." "I can try that," I said. "I can't promise I'll be graceful." "I don't need graceful," he replied. "Just real." Later, we walked the dog through the park. Kids were playing somewhere nearby, laughter cutting through the air. The dog tugged at the leash like everything in the world was worth investigating. Caleb and I moved easily beside each other, conversation drifting in and out. At one point I stopped walking. Caleb noticed immediately, turning back toward me. "What's up?" I took a breath. "I think you became my safe place without meaning to. And I want to make sure I don't turn that into pressure." Caleb stepped closer, free hands sliding into mine like it belonged there. "You didn't. Safety isn't pressure. It's permission." "Permission for what?" "To be messy. To leave and come back. To grow." He squeezed my hand once. "Safe doesn't mean stuck." That settled somewhere deep in my chest. Not fireworks. Not adrenaline. Just clarity. We stood there a moment longer, dog waiting patiently for once, and I felt something solid take root. That night, after he left, I didn't replay everything looking for cracks. I didn't draft backup explanations in my head or prepare for the inevitable loss. I washed my dishes. I set my alarm. I stood by the window and watched the city breathe below me. I thought about the version of myself who ghosted a good man out of fear. I didn't hate him anymore. I understood him. He was trying to survive with the tools he had. Now I had better ones. Caleb didn't fix my life. He didn't save me from myself. He just showed up, consistently and kindly, until my nervous system learned a new language. And when I finally crawled into bed, the quiet didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like space. Space to stay.